Hello, welcome everybody. I'm really happy to be here with you today to present another webinar for Bodywise and in collaboration with the National Eating Disorder Recovery Centre of Dublin. My name is Andreana and I'm a clinical psychologist and a family therapist. So, as the theme of this Eating Disorder Awareness Week is All Stories Matters, we're here to present a webinar with the title Honoring Neurodivergent Stories and Rethinking Eating Disorder Treatment. So, again, my expertise that I developed in the last 3 years with the National Eating Disorder Recovery Centre is mostly really on tailoring treatment plan for neurodivergent clients. So this is very briefly the agenda of our webinar. I will try my best to keep within the hour. And my idea is to also leave something around 5 to 10 minutes to answer any question or comment you might have. So the idea was to start by really exploring the main principle of a neuroaffirmative practice. Moving on then to the risk factors of the neurodivergent people do present to develop and maintain eating disorders. And the accommodation we try to put in place to maximize therapy treatment for this kind of clients. Okay, so first of all, I want to introduce our service. And we do have three main programs in place. One that is directed to adolescents from 12 to 18 years old, where adolescents do attend their one-to-one session on site or online if they need to. And they also access to family therapy and groups of education, for instance, on DBT or parenting groups for their parents. And then we have an adult day program, again dedicated for people over 18 years old, where they can attend from Monday to Friday from 10 to 5, and those clients do access to two main meals and 3 snacks within our service. And then we have our inpatient resident program, which is again running from 24 hours, 24/7, and it is again for people over 18. And within both adult day program and residential program do offer again within the treatment not only psychology, individual sessions and dietetics, but also family therapy session, and group sessions over DBT skills, CBT skills, decider skills, and peer support based group session. So, as I've been working with the National Eating Disorder Recovery Centre for 3 years, I saw and I had the privilege, to see the service growing, not only in the number of the clients we are able to actually assist, but also in the staff that we're able to, our multidisciplinary team has grown. Okay, so as I said before, we do offer and we do have like a peer support program intervention, family therapy, group sessions, and psychology and dietetics, and a psychiatrist, mostly for inpatient residents. But we recently welcomed our occupational therapy, which has been very much something that we strongly wanted to to really embrace and to help neurodivergent client in their recovery. Okay, so as we begin to approach the area of this presentation that covers the principle of neuroaffirmative practice, we want to start by introducing the term of neurodiversity. So this term represents a big shift away from medical and deficit-based language and emphasize a more inclusive and socially aware perspective on cognitive differences. So unlike traditional medical framework, that categorize neurological variation as disorders to be diagnosed and treated, neurodiversity acknowledges that cognitive differences are natural and valuable aspects of human diversity. So, as the medical and evidence-based language typically frames neurological conditions such as autism and ADHD as impairment that need to deviate from a normal and standard need to compensate, okay? So this perspective leads to actually see differences as a very much natural variation of human beings. They don't need to be compensated or, treated, but it needs to be accommodated, okay, and understood. Okay, what else we want to be aware to make sure or to actually make our practice more neuroaffirmative? Okay, we want to be able to recognize the value of diversity, as we mentioned before. We want to be able to empower neurodivergent clients. We want to really let them voice heard, and we want to really meet their language preferences. So what we know is that neurodivergent people do prefer what we call an identity language. So rather than being called as, again, being defined as someone with autism, they would rather want to be named as autistic person, okay? And then we want to really try and make systematical changes. Again, the perspective we want to be able to embrace is not a deficit base where these clients, these people need to be conform to standards, but we want their diversity to be welcomed and accommodated, and we want their system to be inclusive of those differences. We want to really give them a perception. Again, we want to really make them aware of how their neurotype can be present with strengths, and we want to really make these people aware of those strengths and what kind of settings they might be, those strengths might be empowering them. And we want to be able to listen and learn from these clients. Okay, so something that's very important for us as a practitioner to be aware of, okay, that's really take another big step away from the formal medical perception of different neurocognitions, is what has been defined as a double empathy problem. So this is being a research made from Damien Milton, which again is an autistic person, that really redefined what were the communication differences and again stereotypes on emotional difficulties that autistic people presented. So again, what was assessed as difficulties in autistic people to read other people's mind and intention and emotions by Baron Cohen in the theory of mind has been redefined as a difficulty that only stands when neurodivergent people do interact with neurotypical people. So this really much looks like a misunderstanding or a communication gap that happens between two people that come from different cultural backgrounds. Okay, so what research is showing us now is that all those difficulties that again the divergent people do encounter in connecting and relating to neurotypical people don't actually happen between people with the same neurotype. So these people are very much able to make meaningful connection, to make very long-standing and interesting conversation, and not having difficulties in initiating conversations with people that do present with the same neurotype as them. Okay, as we kind of browse, okay, very briefly, again, the principle that we want to really to be aware of as we want to create or want to our practice to be more neuroaffirmative. Since the main focus of this conversation is to present again how neurodivergent people do need their treatment tailored for eating disorder, I thought it was really appropriate to briefly present the main eating disorder we do see represented in our service within the neurodivergent clients. This is very, very much not an extensive course description, but it's just again for the purpose of these this webinar. Okay, so the eating disorder we do see, or disorder eating patterns that we do see commonly in our service are the anorexia nervosa, that kind of is characterized by extreme weight loss and fear of gaining weight and distorted body image. Then we have the binge eating disorder that involves recurrent episodes of eating large quantity of food in a short amount of time and coming up with sense of loss of control and shame and intense discomfort. Bulimia nervosa, which is marked by cycle of binge eating and followed by purging episodes to prevent weight gain, and the same kind of condition of anorexia nervosa. RFID, which stands from, actually is characterized by avoidance of certain foods based on sensory sensitivities, or other fear of choking, for instance, or lack of interest towards food, that leads to significant nutritional deficiencies and then kind of an impediment for growth for younger clients. Orthorexia is not still on DSM, we do know, but these are some anecdotal pattern we do encounter within autistic clients, and it presents with obsession with eating food that fall under the healthy category or perceived healthy category, and that can lead to severe dietary restrictions and therefore might also come with weight loss. Okay, so before we dwell into in describing the risk factors of neurodivergent clients to develop eating disorder, I want to give a brief description of the main neurotype that we're gonna talk about. So the first that we're going to discuss is the autistic neurotype, and they do present with different differences again from the neurotypical people in their executive functioning skills. They might present with strong focus and difficulties in taking initiation tasks. They have a very detail-oriented thinking, so they might focus on very intricate details and and patterns, and maybe not be so focused and not being able to shift to what we define as bigger picture thinking. That really then is very much hand in hand with rigid thinking. So they do present with sensory differences, so they have a unique sensory profile and experiences. They do present with emotional dysregulation. So again, they might really have an intense emotional response to daily events, to stressing events. They do present with repetitive behaviors, and they're very routine oriented, and they do present with repetitive behavior that look like stimming or put things in a line, and that what we might see very commonly presenting in children, and the stereotypical kind of description of autism. And they do present with different communication styles, so they might have difficulties in reading non-verbal cues. They might have difficulties in small talks. And again, as we said before, they might be struggling with understanding metaphors and not literal language. Okay, so now I want to really go into more details, in describing what characteristics of autistic neurotype do present as a risk factor or vulnerability factors in developing and maintaining anorexia. Okay. As we mentioned before, autistic people do present with differences in sensory processing, and a big part in sensory processing is played by interoceptional skills. So interoceptional skills are the ability that we do have to read internal experiences such as bodily state, but also emotional state. Okay. Practically speaking means that again these people might be hypersensitive or hypersensitive to hunger cues, to the need of using bowel movements, right? So they might be, for instance, the act of eating itself. If they they are on the hypersensitive spectrum, okay, it might be somehow painful or something that they can't really kind of distract themselves for. Again, being full is something that is very discomfortable, kind of compared to physical pain. And then we do have similarly differences when it comes to reading emotional states. So they might be kind of desensitized in understanding how their emotional arousal is intensifying, and they might just notice emotions when they might be on the extreme point of the burnout, or the opposite, they might be hypersensitive. So every tiny shift can be very hard for them to regulate. Okay? So this is actually something that we need to be very aware of, as something that does play a big role then in their treatment plan. Okay, continuing on the conversation on the sensory differences of neurodivergent clients, what we know is that autistic people do present with sensory overload. So that means that they might experience feeling overwhelmed by, the stimuli, both external and internal, and this could be difficult for them to manage. And what happens that these clients might be discovering very randomly that starvation, not eating, can be a great way for them to ease this discomfort. So this is something again might start by a random association that's very easy to be reinforced and to be reinforced with the time. And then again, autistic people do present with food-specific sensory sensitivities. So again, very often they do present with difficulties in eating certain food texture, or having difficulties in actually tolerating specific taste and smell or temperature, or they might be very difficult in tolerating different food mixing together in the same plate. And that's again, that really is a big impact on limiting the food repertoire. So as we mentioned before, another really important element on this area is their interceptions. So how they might be hypersensitive to sensory stimuli. So that means that clients, they might have very hypersensitivities to internal body stimuli. They might find eating very difficult. So they might be very distressed uh, when they might feel bloated, or coping with feeling full, or even really navigating the natural sensation and the body shifting that do happen while digesting food. So this experience for them, it's very, very overwhelming, and this again might really be easy for them to try and avoid that, especially when they also need to be around people. Right. Right. So we explored together how, due to their sensory differences, autistic people might really feel overwhelmed just by the act of eating itself. It could be again by having to find a safe food, or dealing with um, the overwhelming physical stimuli to come with it. When then eating is also added to feeling social overwhelm, it can become very tricky. Um, so what we do see very commonly in the formulation of young boys and girls with autism and anorexia is that these young adults, when they have to eat in very sensory overwhelming environments, such as the school canteen, they might be also very aware of um, of being under other people's attention, so they don't want to be seen, they don't want to act awkward, they might want to avoid comments, or they might want to avoid bullying, which unfortunately they're very, very often victim of when it comes to again secondary school. So all this makes again eating in public extremely difficult, and also can really create a high social anxiety. So again, what might happen, that these young people can randomly discover again that dealing with all this while starving, it is much easier, and so that can become very easily an habit that can escalate them in developing anorexia. It's not just that actually. So again, these young adults, they might again struggle with not feeling not belonging, or they don't fit in, and they might feel isolated, okay, from their peer groups. So they might also try to attempt to gain some popularity by trying to achieve certain beauty standards. So they might want to kind of become thin, or prettier, wishing that this kind of can allow them to be more included in with this with peers. Or on the other hand, they might pursue thinness in order to avoid to be commented, to avoid again any kind of to be a victim of bullying. Okay. So we're moving on now to analyze and explore specific thinking styles that autistic people present, and how these overlap with anorexia thinking styles. So we mentioned before that autistic neurotype present with tendency to obsessive thinking and literal thinking. So these two thinking styles make it very easy to kind of take education on healthy eating styles to the extreme, and so they might develop very easily, and very rigid set of rules that they can take then an extensive part of their interest in their day-to-day life. So that it's a risk factor, but then those characteristics make it also very difficult and challenging to break those rules once they're made. And that goes hand in hand with the difficulties they do have in set shifting, and how these trigger, or again exacerbate body image difficulties. So as we said, again, autistic people do present with these difficulties, or a detail-oriented focus of attention. And so once they do interiorize again these rules of what's healthy, what's not healthy, not only when it comes to category of foods, but also in terms of body standards, it is very difficult to break those rules and to let them shift from one aspect of again what they might be considering healthy, to an overall perception of well-being that incorporates other things, right? Again, a bigger picture thinking. Right. Right. So as we said at the beginning, again, autistic neurotype present with difficulties in coping with changes, and reacting with maybe like a higher level of discomfort and dysregulation when without unpredictability. Excuse me. And so what then, in what way this is a risk factor for anorexia? That's because again, these people, when overwhelmed by changes or unpredictability that they might not be able to control, they might find comfort in having control over their food. So this is again something that it's very common presentation, and something that we do see also in neurotypical presentation of anorexia, but is particularly relevant for autistic neurotype. So we're moving on now to explore how the main characteristics of the autistic neurotype do present as risk factors to develop RFID and to maintain RFID. So we do know that RFID presents very likely together with in actually people with autistic neurotype. And that's why, again, the differences in these kind of people, sensory sensitivities, do present with challenges in approach to certain food textures, or again, smells, and sometimes even the colors. And the fact, for instance, that one category of food can present with a substantial difference in taste. So let's say again, fruit, right? Fruit and one kind of piece of strawberry, very likely one tastes the same as another strawberry, depending on how much it matures. So their texture can be different, their taste can be different, their color can be different. So again, for clients, they do present with a very like difficulties in dealing with unpredictability. These can be very overwhelming. So again, that's why autistic children and therefore then adults might stick with what seems to be predictable. We do know that there are individuals that might be able to identify the differences between different brands of a certain food. Excuse me. Again, people that can distinguish their cornflakes from the Kellogg's brand from the John's brand. So that's how heightened the sensitivity can be. That's a good example. So again, this goes hand in hand with the rigid thinking styles and high anxiety traits, where tackling something new or different or unfamiliar can be quite difficult. And this is also added up with feelings overwhelmed in social situations. Yeah, and so that really is a reason why the autistic profile can very easily or frequently, right, develop perfect. This is a nice slide, again, nice visual, because we do love a good visual that explains what I was trying to describe before. Again, from the outside, for normal neurotypical people, right, it might be very hard to understand why children and adults that present with RFID do struggle to eat food such as some kind of fruits, because for us it's the same thing, but it's not for them, because one blueberry can be juicy or one, so depending on their maturity, they can be sweeter, more sour, and different texture. So it is very hard for them to predict once they have the blueberries, in front of them, to understand what might taste like and what might feel like as a texture. But on the other hand, the cracker looks the same, it tastes the same, and it's very easy to predict. So that's a really good way of describing this. So, all right, we covered for this presentation purpose the conversation on autism and eating disorder presentations, and we can move on the ADHD neurotype. So We do know now that ADHD and autism do overlap quite frequently, and we will discuss briefly about how this look like later on. But if we had to describe the main differences or the core element of the ADHD neurotype, I think it's fair to kind of focus the conversation on the differences in their executive functioning and the sensory differences. So we start by really exploring the executive functioning differences. So ADHDer, so they might present with difficulties with procrastination. So they might tend to kind of procrastinate what needs to be done. They might struggle with taking initiative, and so they might present with frequent avoidance behavior. They might have difficulties in have an estimation of how much time a task might intake, which is called time blindness. So again, practically speaking, these can be again very overwhelming for ADHD because when it comes to listing a to-do list for the day, not knowing how much time a task might take and therefore how much time they need to clear the schedule for to get it done might be very hard. It might be then overwhelming. Again, going back to then procrastination and avoidance behavior. So they also present with hyperfocus. So basically, differently from autistic people, ADHD do change their focus of interest. But when they actually, their attention is focused on something they enjoy, their focus is actually very difficult to be shifted. So what it looks like is that ADHD individuals, when they are actually attending something they enjoy, they forget anything else. So they might be really neglecting whether they need to go to the bathroom, what time it is, whether it's actually getting dark, so whether they'll be sitting there for 10 or 2 hours, 10 minutes or 2 hours. So everything else kind of disappear completely from their attention. And this we will see now after does play a big role again, is a risk factor in developing and maintaining eating disorder. Okay, they might have difficulties in making decisions. Again, going back to what we said before, since when it comes to prioritizing what stimuli attend to, how to prioritize tasks, again, and stimuli that are also they're all elements that we do need to be aware when it comes to making a decision. And then as well as autistic people, ADHD individuals too might have differences in intersectional skills. Again, both for bodily sensation and emotional state. And they also might have differences or challenges with working memory. So they might have difficulties in getting or remembering instructions they've been given to. So again, for this kind of clients, that it's very important to use visual handouts and very brief and very easy to kind of focus on. Okay, when it comes to the differences that ADHD represent in their sensory processing, we know that given a lower percentage, a lower presence of dopamine in their brain, these people can be presenting with sensory seeking behavior. So basically, they do crave stimulation. They get bored very quickly. And differently from autistic people, they don't really try, they don't really seek routines, but they do actually take the benefit from a structured environment. Excuse me. So again, they do crave novelty, and they do develop also kind of risky behaviors and impulsive behaviors. That also again is very much linked with also their difficulties in inhibition and control coming from the executive functions. And they do present with simian behaviors, and they might be they might be presenting with preferences in eating ultra-processed food, and this is because those are food they do provide with high dopamine content, so that's very much something they can easily get used to, and they can really feel very gratified from. And those are again elements that do present risk factors for developing eating disorders, as we will see briefly. Okay, so now we're gonna go to analyze, okay, how then the main characteristic of the ADHD neurotype do represent risk factors and maintaining factors to develop binge eating disorder and bulimia. So as we said, get ADHD do present with executive functioning challenges. They might struggle to plan. They might struggle to attend and attend their internal stimuli, whether they're hungry, whether they're not hungry. So they might forget to eat what time it is, and they might end up then having to make the decision on what to eat when they might be starving. And that can be then a very easy trigger to binge, and then the aftermath of being full can then be compensated and followed by purging episodes. We do know again the presentation and the behaviors are different in being the binge eating disorder and the bulimia. So again, we note that in binge eating disorder, there's no compensatory behavior following a binge, but in the bulimia, those episodes are followed by purging episodes and compensation behaviors. Excuse me. So again, these vulnerability factors are also again so another vulnerability factor. Excuse me, is that again, as we said before, ADHD do tend to crave sugary food, and as we know, those foods they might not provide with a sustainable and consistent nutritional elements that still lead to kind of overeat. It might end up, in creating, binge episodes, and again, whether they might or not may not be followed by compensatory behaviors. So as we said before, I also wanted to give a very brief touch on the ADHD neurotype, which is a neurotype where characteristics from both autism and ADHD are combined. So people with ADHD neurotype might experience sensory sensitivities and struggle with impulse control, and find having challenges in their executive functioning skills. They might crave for routine and yet also present with sensory seeking behaviors. They might struggle with organization and have a deep and varied interest, and they might struggle to read unwritten social rules and non-verbal cues, and having intense activation when experiencing emotion. Their strengths can include creativity, a deep focus on interest, and the ability to regulate through engaging activities. We're moving on the third part of this webinar, which is the accommodation that we as a service put in place to meet at our best the needs of clients presenting with eating disorders and neurodivergency traits. So the first, and I want to start by really sharing with you the challenges we have found that really forced us to make changes. So the first challenge we have found was to assessing clients that were presented with eating disorder, but they were not aware of also being neurodivergent. So, and we saw a high percentage of people with these characteristics. So that this awareness made us make few changes in the way we in our assessment protocol. We do now have, together with the standards assessment tools, to identify and eating disorders. Also add screening tools to identify neurodivergency. What has been difficult, and still is difficult, because these are an ongoing process, was to again accommodate the needs of neurodivergent clients as well as neurotypical clients, because in our service we do treat both, and we had to identify and be better and identifying the differences between depression and depressive state and autism and ADHD burnout. We had to adapt group rules to allow neurodivergent clients to meet their different attention needs. We had to educate parents and clients on neurodivergency. We had to learn how to differentiate stimming behaviors from ED compensatory behaviors. And we had to adapt meal plan to compensate stimming behaviors as well, together with creating meal plan that will actually also meet the differences, sensitivities for the divergent clients. And we had to adapt their timetable for residential clients in order to allow for social breaks and prevent experiencing burnout. So this slide can really be a good conversation input to try and see the complexity of what we are trying to talk about when it comes to being aware of how a behavior and how the appearances and the meaning of a behavior can be very different, whether it might come from a person with a different neurotype. So again, as us holistic, or again, no neurotypical people, we are used to read someone presenting with his hood up or his or her hood up, and hiding their gaze, or not really giving eye contact, or not answering questions, and having their hands in the pockets, and kind of answering to question with a very brief and short language, not following up to the instructions that this person has been given. We see these behaviors as showing as being rude or aggressive or defiant. Okay, so but those the same behavior from a neurodivergent perspective can be very much like the attempt of having their hood up to try and prevent or to kind of ease their sensory difficulties and overwhelm, and not giving eye contact is actually, rather than distraction or lack of attention, can be quite the opposite, can be their attempt to give us more attention and to be more focused on our conversation. And not answering question might be not, again, a sign of defiance or lack of interest, might be their difficulties in answering the kind of question. Again, as we mentioned before, answering to open question can be very overwhelming for neurodivergent people. And their hands in the pocket can be, first of all, a way to hide eventually stimming behaviors or trying to suppress stimming behaviors. And the short talk or the short answer might be, again, coming from a different communication styles, and not being able to follow up on instructions can be, first of all, the consequence of not being able to retain the instructions that was given to them, or because it might be a trait of what is being defined then as pervasive demand avoidance, which is a trait that is very likely to present in autistic people, where following up to an instruction or a demand can be anxiety provoking, and therefore something that they feel they need to avoid. So what did we do? So we started to be aware of first of all, the environment of our service, and we tried our best to make it more accessible for neurodivergent clients. So that meant being aware of not having room overly cluttered and having kind of light colored walls and um, soft lighting, and being aware of trying to keep the overall noise as quiet as possible. We made sure that in every room there was enough space so that every one-to-one conversation was going to give a neurodivergent client enough space not to feel in too much proximity with the professional practitioner. And also every room is provided with fidget toys, so that clients can have easy access to sensory stimulation, and without having to ask or to go too much hassle to get access to useful resources for them. We also set up like a sensory and quiet room where the clients can access to, with again not having to ask staff or anything. It's just there when they need it to. Right. So when it comes to tailoring a care plan for a client, again, an individual client with an eating disorder, what we the accommodation we made were, first of all, to add in this client profile their sensory profile, and also adding as a part of the treatment goals to improve their interoception awareness, and an executive function assessment, and that is going to be then a core element of the treatment plan. Exploration of the special interest, and including then the special interest in the treatment plan. The aim to improve the flexible thinking, allowing a care plan where the build plan needs to meet the sensitivities, and including education on neurodivergency, just to foster to our best, really, these clients to develop a positive identity around their neurodivergency. Yeah, that's it. So the previous slide was including adaptation that we can apply to any neurodivergent client, but when it comes to maybe adapting the plan for autistic neurotype, we can be more specific, and there might be area of intervention that may be specifically useful for these kind of clients. So the first step would be definitely providing psychoeducation on the autistic condition and running a sensory profile assessment. Very likely the care plan would include working on the social anxiety elements, again, not with the intent of trying to bridge the gap between their social skills to neurotypical people, but mostly to work on the internalized shame and really reshape the masking behaviors these clients might have developed throughout the years. And then we want to really work on and improve their flexible thinking. We want to improve their interceptional skills, and they may want to provide emotional training. And we found a really good response with adapting DBT for these kind of clients. We will definitely need to tailor their plan on the sensory profile, and we want to include the special interest in the profile. And what we found also useful is to create a client profile for staff to access, where these clients can be, we can describe this client's main likes and dislikes, sensory speaking, in their sensory differences. their communication styles and their special interest. Okay, we're now moving on to the accommodation we found useful to meet the needs of neurodivergent clients, actually ADHD clients with binge eating disorder and bulimia, was first of all to advise to start ADHD medication, which has been proved can have important support in for these clients improving their inhibition and control and their impulsivity. But then we felt the need to provide for these clients again psychoeducation on their ADHD neurotypes, and again it's really important not to underestimate the importance on this. So the more awareness these clients have on their differences, the more they're able to foster self-compassion, and this is actually extremely important for their overall recovery outcome. Then we definitely want to work to improve or to really give them skills to overcome difficulties in planning, and again improving their interception skills. As if you remember, so what happens for these clients that they might be so focused on something they enjoy, they might forget they need to eat. They might forget, to plan in advance what they need to eat, and they might end up eating ultra processed food. They can do easily trigger binge and so on and so forth. So again, these intervention or therapy goals are really focusing on trying to support these clients in improve their decision making when it comes to food. And these can also include supporting these clients to set up visual tools and external reminder for time, or really to suggest alternative behaviors, changing the settings when the binge do occur. So this is very much something that goes hand in hand both with psychology and occupational therapy. Okay, moving on to the accommodation that need to happen, right, when treating orphaned in autistic people. What we know and the best practice for orphaned is CBT and exposure training strategies, and where a sensory profile of these clients can be hugely beneficial, because it can give us a really good way to try and pair feed food with high preferred sensory stimuli. And the thing that makes recovery from HARFID very difficult is that it really takes a lot of time. And because again, when we want these clients to be able to approach new food, we want to encourage an exploration and a familiarization to the new food by all the senses before actually attempt to eat. So since this is something that again takes a lot of time and a lot of energy, it's very demanding. So since we do want to take the stance from medical perspective, where our aim is not to change these clients' eating habits in a way that is more similar or conform to neurotypical people. So we don't want them to have a variety of food repertoire if it's not necessary. So we want to move from a stance of assuring that these clients can access to and meet their basic nutritional needs, not also wanting to push them and to actually force them to challenge and tackle unfamiliar food unless it's strictly needed for their overall health. So that's very key for make these treatment sustainable for again clients presenting with ARFID and with autistic neurotype. Okay, briefly now. So what I wanted to do was really make some time and give more practical advice or input. Okay, for some of you that want to try and incorporate in your own setting, your own service adjustment that might make your practice more neuroaffirmative. So again, the changes we want to be able to make and to in your own one-to-one setting, first of all, is by providing and having like sensory box accessible. And again, I think this is something that you might want to do with any client, okay? Not necessarily with people that you might be aware they might be neurodivergent. This is something you can do for any client. Then could be very useful to build up again specifically for autistic neurotype and autistic people. Build a routine within your sessions. So for, let's say that you start your session within a breathing exercise and you close it with a breathing exercise, so that you do provide predictability and you do provide a structure where the client can feel at ease. You want to be able to provide visual handouts, and what I really found useful for again both ADHD and autistic individuals, provide a summary of the session by email afterwards. That's highly appreciated. And then send reminders before the session, like 1 day or 2 days ahead of the session, and maybe providing also the options of attending online if they want to. Try to avoid open questions, so try to really have a literal or very pragmatical as much as possible communication style, avoid metaphors, and giving and providing strategies bottom up for them to regulate their emotion and to ground themselves. I love, and I think it's very much appreciated, using a billboard as I'm conducting my session, and definitely being able to include a special interest. It's very, very important. It's very useful. Again, we don't want to assume therapeutic goals, so we really want to have their voice being heard and just work on what they want to achieve. So when it comes to the accommodation and the changes we had to make or we found useful to make to meet, again, the needs of the neurodivergent client, first of all was also to give access to fidget toys. And then there was a particularly tricky one. So we allow clients, again, those kind of clients, to access to alternative activities they might be attend to while attending the group. So they could color, they could use fidget toys, but also knitting, or again access to tablet and or the phone sometimes. Again, this is particularly difficult to incorporate when we have members of the group that are again neurotypical and neurodivergent, because again basic rules of a group is to kind of leave the phone out of the room because it's a sign of distraction. But again, once we do our assessment, once we do our care plan, we find that for those clients, being able to attend their phone, it is the best way for them to keep their attention also on the group content. We do allow them to do so, but we also need to kind of explain to the other clients why this is possible and why it's actually very much part of their care plan. So we do allow these clients for movement breaks, and we adapt the mindfulness skills to their sensory needs, and again, tip skills for their sensory needs. We do provide, again, as you said, education on neurotypical clients, on neurodivergent client needs. We do provide for visual and handouts, and we ask for anonymous feedback. So the asking for feedback is something I also do in the one-to-one session, but I think the option for these clients to provide anonymous feedback in group setting is very, very important, because again, we do know that these people might come from a long-standing sense of shame and cognition that they need to avoid. Maybe their voice might not be heard, and their difficulties and their struggles are basically very much their own fault. So allowing them to consistently have access to provide the feedback and showing that this feedback is actually taken into consideration is a great way to improve these clients' assertivity and confidence. This is the format that I use to ask for feedback for clients, and not only neurodivergent clients, actually any kind of client. And I like this a lot because again, it gives option to leave any kind of comment in any way they want to, coloring, drawing, writing, anything. And it also gives them the input to leave a comment and feedback on something positive, something they do appreciated during the session, something they did not appreciate. And this is not just an opportunity for them to share critical feedback, but also a really good example and a really good practice to pay attention to both ends of an event. So just really give them a good example how they might need to start integrating that, one event present with something positive and something negative at the same time, right? Working on flexible thinking. A few other example of visual that we use, but again, get creative. There's a plenty of resources out there that you can take inspiration from. Just to give you an idea of how we really find useful using visuals, also to explore different ways for them to identify and getting in touch with their needs. So there's an example of other ways for clients, for people to identify anger cues. This is an example of an anger scale. Again, this is very, very important, and this is something that we can find equally useful for both clients with restricting behavior patterns and binging patterns. And there's a cute example again of why ways that we try and explore within the clients activities that do provide energy, and what actually takes energy from them, and kind of making a plan of what they can do to prevent or to kind of recover from eventually experiencing an emotional burnout. And that's the end of my presentation. So, and I will take some time now to answer the question that I've been receiving from the chat. And yeah, thank you really much for your attention.